April 7, 1943. The humid morning air clung to every surface of the small Pacific island, mixing with the acrid scent of smoke from distant explosions. Waves pounded against jagged rocks just beyond the tree line, masking the distant rumble of artillery. Somewhere, hidden among the dense foliage, a soldier crouched low, his M1 Garand rifle pressed tightly against his shoulder. The metallic click of the bolt, the rasp of his breath, and the faint rustle of leaves were the only sounds separating him from the chaos around him. Every heartbeat thudded in rhythm with the distant gunfire, a reminder that life here was a fragile, fleeting thing. In the months leading up to that fateful morning, the Pacific Theater had become a crucible of innovation, desperation, and raw courage. The U.S. Army had learned that ingenuity on the battlefield often meant the difference between life and death. Among these soldiers, there were those whose actions, though small in scale, created ripples that would alter entire engagements. One such soldier, whose name would be etched into military history for his extraordinary actions, faced a situation that tested both his skill and his nerve to the very limit. He was part of a reinforced infantry company sent to secure a strategic ridge that overlooked a critical Japanese supply route. Intelligence reports suggested that hundreds of enemy troops were entrenched nearby, a mix of seasoned veterans and newly conscripted soldiers. The ridge was heavily forested, providing both cover and concealment, but it also meant any misstep could be fatal. The men had been marching through thick mud for days, fatigue etching deep lines on their faces, yet morale remained surprisingly high. They were well trained, disciplined, and determined, but even the bravest hearts could not escape the reality of war, that one miscalculation could cost lives. On that morning, the soldiers' company had been assigned to hold a defensive perimeter while engineers cleared a path for advancing forces. Japanese forces were known for their aggressive counterattacks, often using the dense jungle to launch sudden ambushes. The tension among the soldiers was palpable. Every snap of a twig, every distant bark of a gunshot, made muscles tense and senses sharpen. Yet amidst this pressure, the soldier displayed an unusual calm. His training, experience, and quick thinking would soon transform what could have been a devastating loss into a story of extraordinary bravery. The M1 Garand, standard issue to U.S. infantry, was a reliable rifle, but it had a quirk that soldiers often feared: the N-block clip. When the last round was fired, the clip ejected with a distinctive ping sound, loud enough to alert nearby enemies to a soldier's vulnerability. To most, this was a minor inconvenience, but in close combat, it could be deadly. Few soldiers mastered the art of minimizing exposure during a reload, yet those who did often gained a critical advantage in firefights. This soldier, drawing on countless hours of training and battlefield improvisation, had developed a technique that allowed him to maintain continuous fire while reloading. It wasn't a trick taught in manuals. It was an adaptation born of necessity, honed through observation, trial, and the constant pressure of survival. He knew that in the chaos of the Pacific jungles, timing and rhythm were everything. A single misstep could mean death, not just for him, but for the men depending on him. As dawn broke, the first wave of Japanese soldiers emerged from the underbrush. The soldier was positioned on the left flank, his company spread across a jagged stretch of ridge that overlooked the valley below. With each figure moving into view, the tension ratcheted higher. He adjusted his grip, feeling the familiar weight of the M1, listening to the cacophony of the battlefield. The distant shrieks of artillery, the bark of rifles, the muffled cries of soldiers exchanging fire. Every second seemed to stretch into eternity. In that moment, it wasn't just a fight for territory. It was a test of human ingenuity, endurance, and nerve. Would his carefully practiced reload technique hold under pressure? Could one man really make a difference against a tide of enemies? The answers lay in action, and the battlefield waits for no hesitation. Meanwhile, the rest of the company prepared defensive positions, their movements precise but shadowed by the growing realization that the enemy's numbers were greater than expected. Machine gun nests rattled in the distance, and mortars thumped the earth with a steady, ominous cadence. Among the trees, the soldier observed the enemy's advance, noting their patterns, pauses, and vulnerabilities. Each moment was a choice of fire, hold, or risk exposing himself to devastating counterfire. The concept of small unit tactics, emphasized in training manuals but only truly understood in combat, was about to be put to the ultimate test. Every decision mattered, every movement could tip the scales, and, for this soldier, it was not just a matter of personal survival. It was about safeguarding the lives of nearly 200 men. Even the simplest actions became monumental under such conditions. Breathing carefully, controlling the slightest twitch, anticipating enemy behavior, and executing a perfectly timed reload, these were not small feats. They were acts of life and death. In those early minutes, the soldier's mind worked like a finely tuned instrument, each thought precise, each movement deliberate. The air smelled of wet earth, gunpowder, and something more intangible, a tension that clung to every branch, every rock, and every man. Birds had fallen silent, even the wind seemed to hold its breath. Somewhere behind the ridge, commanding officers monitored the operation, unaware that a single man's ingenuity might soon become the pivot upon which the battle would turn. As enemy soldiers advanced into range, the first shots rang out. The soldier fired carefully, deliberately, taking advantage of every small opening. Each enemy that fell marked not just a kill, but a crucial moment buying time for the rest of his comrades to establish stronger defensive positions. He had learned to move and fire in rhythm, using his reload trick to maintain a continuous rate of fire that would soon astonish even seasoned observers. The scene was chaotic, terrifying, and mesmerizing all at once. A living portrait of war's duality, horror and heroism intertwined. And while the outcome was far from certain, one truth was becoming clear: this soldier was about to perform an act that would echo far beyond the ridge, leaving a mark on military history that would be studied and remembered for decades to come. The sun had climbed higher by mid-morning, but the ridge remained a shadowed maze of twisted roots, fallen logs, and dense ferns. The soldier adjusted his stance, feeling the sweat run into his eyes, salty and bitter, stinging his skin. Every movement was deliberate, every sound had meaning. In the distance, Japanese soldiers advanced cautiously, their rifles glinting in the filtered sunlight. But few suspected the deadly rhythm that awaited them. His reload trick was deceptively simple, yet ingeniously effective. The M1 Garand's N block clip, which ejected with a loud ping after the last round, normally left soldiers vulnerable for precious seconds. But he had perfected a method to chamber a new clip while keeping his sights trained on the enemy. He could maintain a nearly continuous rate of fire, alternating precision shots with bursts that slowed the enemy advance. In practice, this allowed him to punch well above the normal limitations of a single rifleman. The first volley erupted. The sharp crack of bullets punctuated the humid morning, the sound bouncing off the rocks and trees. Enemy soldiers stumbled, some falling outright, others seeking cover. The soldier's heart pounded, not with fear, but with focus. Every shot was calculated. Every pause, every small adjustment in stance or grip could mean the difference between life and death. Nearby, his comrades reacted to the initial wave, returning fire with a mix of rifles, Browning automatic rifles, and machine guns. Mortars thundered in the distance, sending clouds of dust into the air, and the smell of scorched earth mixed with gunpowder. Yet, despite the chaos, the soldier's mind remained clear. He had learned in training that panic could be as deadly as the enemy, and calm precision could save hundreds of lives. As the Japanese pressed forward, he shifted slightly, lining up another shot. A brief moment of hesitation, and the enemy would spot the ping, the telltale sign of an empty rifle. But this soldier had trained for that moment. With a smooth, practiced motion, he chambered a new clip mid-fire, never losing his line of sight, never breaking his rhythm. 1, 2, 3 enemies dropped in succession. His comrades, inspired by his actions, found renewed courage. Soldiers who had been pinned behind logs and rocks now moved forward with purpose, using the cover provided and coordinating their fire. In small unit tactics, this type of initiative, one soldier's brilliance inspiring an entire squad, could turn the tide. And that's exactly what happened. The firefight escalated. The ridge, once a quiet stretch of jungle, became a vortex of lead, smoke, and shouted commands. Trees shuddered under the impact of bullets, ferns were torn apart by ricochets, and the distant rumble of artillery served as a constant reminder of the larger war raging across the Pacific. The soldier's focus never wavered. Each time the clip pinned, he executed the reload trick flawlessly, continuing to lay down suppressive fire. He became a living wall of resistance, slowing the enemy advance long enough for reinforcements to fortify positions. Interestingly, this technique, while simple in principle, had rarely been documented in training manuals. Most soldiers were instructed to reload quickly, but continuous fire under direct threat required timing, rhythm, and nerves of steel. Observers would later note that his movements seemed almost choreographed, an almost mechanical precision born of instinct owned by necessity. The enemy, realizing the unusual resistance, adapted. They attempted flanking maneuvers, trying to bypass the ridge and isolate pockets of American troops. But the soldier anticipated these movements, shifting positions while maintaining continuous fire. His actions not only inflicted casualties, but also created a psychological effect. The Japanese troops began to hesitate, unsure of where the next shot would come from. That hesitation, even a split second, proved deadly in such a fast-moving engagement. Amidst the action, small human moments punctuated the chaos. A fellow soldier called out for water. A comrade tried to drag a wounded man to cover, and the soldier's eyes briefly caught the flash of fear and determination on those around him. War was never only about strategy or firepower. It was about people, instincts, and courage under pressure. And here, in the dense jungle, those qualities were amplified to their extreme. Over the course of the battle, estimates suggest the soldier directly engaged and killed around 40 enemy troops. Each shot was not merely an act of destruction. It was a tactical decision that bought his comrades time, space, and life. And behind every action, there was a constant calculation: distance, cover, timing, reload rhythm. It was a deadly dance, and one misstep could have been catastrophic. Historical records, including after-action reports and witness testimonies, highlight how remarkable this feat was. One sergeant wrote later, "I've never seen anyone move, aim, and reload with such precision. It was as if he had 6 eyes instead of 2. Every second counted, and he made every single one matter." The ingenuity, courage, and composure displayed here were not anomalies. They were the product of rigorous training, battlefield experience, and an unshakable sense of responsibility toward fellow soldiers. Meanwhile, back at the supply lines, commanders received fragmented reports of the engagement. The scale of the firefight and the number of enemy casualties caused concern. How had a single soldier managed to hold back an entire wave? This story would later circulate among infantry units as an example of initiative, adaptability, and the deadly impact of mastering one's weapon under pressure. In the aftermath, as the smoke cleared and the ridge fell silent except for distant echoes of artillery, the soldier lowered his rifle. Fatigue, sweat, and dirt covered him from head to toe, but the ridge had held. Nearly 200 men owed their lives, at least in part, to one man's ingenuity and calm under pressure. He had turned what could have been a devastating defeat into a defensive victory, not through numbers or firepower alone, but through technique, timing, and the courage to act decisively. And yet, the story does not end with numbers or tactical charts. The real impact lay in the psychological lesson, the proof that human adaptability, even in the smallest technical details, could shift the balance of life and death. The soldier's reload trick became a point of study for trainers, a blueprint for how a single individual could influence the battlefield in ways that manuals alone could never teach. Even today, military historians examine the engagement for insights into small unit tactics, improvisation, and the application of human ingenuity in life or death situations. What can one man do when pressed to the edge of survival? In this case, he did more than survive. He saved lives, inspired courage, and demonstrated the deadly precision that emerges when necessity meets skill. By late afternoon, the ridge was transformed. The air hung heavy with smoke, the acrid smell of gunpowder mixing with the earthy scent of torn-up soil and crushed vegetation. Shell craters dotted the terrain, and scattered equipment bore silent testimony to the intensity of the battle. Yet, amidst the carnage, the soldier remained vigilant, eyes scanning every shadow, ears tuned to the smallest sound. He knew the danger was not over. In war, victory could be fleeting. One misjudged moment could undo everything. The Japanese troops, demoralized by the unexpected resistance and continuous fire, attempted a final push. They advanced cautiously, their disciplined formations giving way to improvisation under pressure. For the soldier, this was the moment when skill, courage, and nerves were tested to the absolute limit. Each enemy that stepped into range became a critical decision. Fire too soon, and he risked wasting ammunition; too late, and comrades could be exposed. Yet, he moved with precision, his reload trick functioning like clockwork. Bullets cracked through the humid air, ricocheting off rocks, felling enemy soldiers, and buying crucial seconds for the men behind him to reposition and strengthen their lines. Amidst the firefight, the human element never waned. He glimpsed a young private struggling to move a wounded comrade, the fear and determination etched across his face. For a fleeting moment, the soldier considered his own exhaustion, the fatigue in his arms, the sweat stinging his eyes, the deep ache in every muscle. Yet he pressed on. Every life saved, every enemy stopped, reinforced the stakes. This was no longer just about holding a ridge. It was about protecting brothers in arms who trusted him with their lives. By evening, the last of the advancing Japanese forces began to withdraw. Silence returned to the ridge, broken only by the distant echoes of artillery and the occasional crackle of gunfire from sporadic skirmishes. Soldiers emerged from cover, assessing the toll. Nearly 40 enemy combatants had fallen to the soldier's relentless fire, and his company, numbering close to 190 men, had held their positions without catastrophic losses. The figures alone were staggering, but what lingered in the minds of those present was not the tally of kills. It was the rhythm, precision, and courage displayed under unimaginable pressure. Later, after the ridge had been secured and medics tended to the wounded, commanders gathered accounts of the engagement. Reports highlighted how one soldier's mastery of his weapon and his innovative reload technique had created a force multiplier effect. Where others might have faltered, his calm decisiveness amplified the effectiveness of the entire unit. It was a textbook example of how ingenuity owned skill, and courage could turn the tide in a battle that might have otherwise ended in disaster. Historians later examined this engagement, emphasizing not just the numbers, but the lessons it carried. small unit tactics, improvisation under pressure, and the psychological impact of continuous, precise fire all played roles that could not be captured in standard military manuals. His actions demonstrated that even in large-scale warfare, individual initiative could shape outcomes in ways that machines, artillery, or sheer numbers could not. Yet, beyond tactics and technical skill, there was a deeper, human story. This soldier's determination reflected the broader experience of countless men in the Pacific theater: courage forged in adversity, ingenuity born of necessity, and the relentless drive to protect those around them. In the dense jungles, under the oppressive weight of enemy fire, ordinary soldiers performed extraordinary acts that would be remembered, studied, and honored long after the guns fell silent. As night fell, the ridge lay quiet. Soldiers cleaned weapons, treated wounds, and whispered accounts of the day's events. Around campfires, stories spread, stories of bravery, ingenuity, and the one soldier whose reload trick had become legend. Yet the soldier himself remained humble, aware that war was larger than any one act. Still, his actions had created a moment of clarity amid chaos, a demonstration of human capability at its most precise and courageous. Looking back through the lens of history, this story reminds us of the critical importance of adaptation, innovation, and resolve. Modern military studies often reference engagements like this to illustrate how technique, timing, and calm under pressure can turn desperate situations into survival and success. But perhaps more importantly, it highlights the human element. The courage, quick thinking, and responsibility that define heroism, not just in war, but in life. In the end, the ridge was more than a geographic point on a map. It became a symbol of what one determined, skilled, and focused individual could accomplish when circumstances demanded it. 40 enemy soldiers stopped, nearly 200 lives preserved, and countless others inspired by courage under fire. It was a testament to human ingenuity and the capacity to act decisively when every second counts. And as the fireflies began to dance in the humid night air, mingling with the faint smoke of spent cartridges, one truth remained. History is shaped not only by grand strategies and massive armies, but by small, extraordinary moments. Moments when skill meets courage, when training meets instinct, and when ordinary soldiers become the agents of survival for those around them. Perhaps the most enduring lesson from that ridge is this: in both war and life, ingenuity and courage matter more than size, more than strength, more than the numbers on a battlefield. One person acting with focus and precision can change the course of events in ways that resonate for decades. And for those watching today, it serves as a reminder to look closely, to act decisively, and to recognize the extraordinary potential within each of us, even in the most daunting circumstances. The ridge, the battle, the soldier's reload trick, they live on in history not only as a tactical achievement, but as a profound testament to human courage and innovation. And while the guns of World War II have long since fallen silent, the lessons endure: preparation, calm under pressure, ingenuity, and the unwavering commitment to protect those around you remain as vital today as they were on that humid Pacific morning in 1943.